Welcome back to Talk Today. It's coming up to 6:30. We'll have the papers in just a moment, but let's give you a quick glimpse of what else is coming up on the show.
Liverpool coming from behind last night to edge Fulham in the first leg of their League Cup semi-final. At 7:15, TalkSport's Sam Ellar brings us the very latest.
The Red Sea raids. The US and the UK have repelled the largest attack by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. Former chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood, will join us at 7:15.
And light and shade, my friends. Not so Quality Street. I'm appalled. They've changed the packaging and I don't think they taste as good. Everybody in this building thinks I'm nuts, bar Emma Wolf. They're not shiny anymore, they're dull. I've got a food psychologist on this show later to prove me right. There you go.
I can't wait for that. Well, as you've said, Emma Wolf is in the studio, the writer of the broadcast, and the author, James
Start with
Bloodworth.
Quality Street. Ask her.
Look, effectively, this woman had a very, very strong review for Quality Street. She basically just never getting the business anymore. I thought, have you seen this video? She was very cross. No. I thought it was a parody.
Very cross.
And then when we showed it to Jeremy just was as cross as this lady.
The packaging is all wrong. It's all muted and it's not shiny anymore.
Love you,
and they
Wolfie.
don't taste as good.
James, how bothered are you?
Well, in our house over Christmas we had roses and celebrations, so I'm not that bothered. What's the rationale for doing this?
Oh, it's just, I tell you what, it looks like sustainable vegan wrapping, and it just means to me I'm not interested. Do you not agree?
It does.
I'll do it later on the show.
There's something, it looks like it's made out of, wax or...
It's very dull, the colours.
Yes, it's very dull.
Oh, backtracking now, because you're in the minority. Yes, I've sussed you out, righty.
What we're going to do is speak... So this psychologist is talking all about how, Coca-Cola tastes different if you drink it out of a glass bottle than out of a can. So it's all about how the way food is presented does alter what it tastes like.
And for anybody tuning in going, hold on a second, what about the post office crisis or the Red Sea? We're going to get to that, but honestly, I can't do that all the time.
Shall we look then
Yes.
at the post office? Of course, on the front page of most of the papers.
Every paper.
Emma, on the Mail, the headline is the £75,000 deal sparks a new battle with post office victims. This is a very big leap forward. Of course, there's going to be many degrees of layers of complexity, but what's this debate about?
Yeah, I mean, this is... OK, so Sunak has announced this legislation that will overturn the wrongful convictions of over 900 of the postmasters. But lots of them are still going to face very lengthy waits for compensation. This initial offer of 75,000 for many of them doesn't go far enough. They lost their lives, they lost their livelihoods, some of them went to prison. Some of them paid legal costs of over £300,000. There's one man in the Daily Mail story, which was very moving. He talks about the stigma and the shame. He became a recluse. We know about people's marriages, people's mental health being affected. And people were declared bankrupt, some cashed in their pensions. So financially, emotionally, mentally, just in terms of their life.
Completely agree. There was a guy on Monday, bless him, I can't remember his name, and he said, it just really resonated. He said, so they said we owed, do you remember this, 22 grand? Yeah. So my parents and I raided our savings, paid it back although we knew we were innocent. Wait for it. And the minute we paid it back, the post office went, you're guilty. Yeah. And prosecuted. And on the front of the Telegraph, I know we're concentrating, but this is a subject, James. Post office handed out bonuses for people to convict innocent people. So you know what, Bloodworth? Go today and get me a couple of pay 500 quid a time. It's appalling, man. This should end, should it not, in prison sentences. Sorry.
Yeah, and it's remarkable that in 2019, the government of the day gave CBE, I think it was, to the person the lady who was head of the post office.
All services to the post office.
Yeah, and it
was 20. It wasn't a general...
This has been going on for almost 20 years now. And
I think it's really important.
2019.
We're not going to have an argument, but I think it's really important to say, and I know you'll agree with me, this is not any political party. Sir Ed Davey, they're saying he should have his knighthood rescinded because he, of course, was the post office minister. This started with May and Cameron. This is steep.
Yeah,
it was the little people. It was people running our
against
post offices
the massive,
up and down the country. People, the fabric of the community, villages and towns. It wasn't sexy. It wasn't glamorous. People were writing about this. There were some headlines in the Sun, way back in 2011, 2012. But really, it never hit the headlines like this. And it's just funny and sad and weird that it takes an ITV drama.
Yeah,
well, maybe that's a benefit.
Election year. And I think because it's an election year. So we're hearing all the time now that this is, the greatest miscarriage of justice in British history. Yeah, it's been going on almost 20 years and there's hardly anything been done about it until there's an ITV drama. and it's an election year.
In part, it took so long because no one saw lots to gain from taking this down, apart from the postmasters. Had it been sort of a slam dunk that it was under one party or there was one specific person involved and someone else could gain something by saying, I'm going to pin all the blame on you and hunt you down, it would have been easier. But there were too many people involved.
It sounds like a cover-up by the establishment against the little person,
and
doesn't
across
it?
the papers, there are stories, so many stories. IT experts 20 years ago saying, this is not fit for purpose. You know, this system doesn't work, the Horizon system. So it's not as though people didn't know.
It's too much faith in technology and not enough faith in the ordinary person, almost.
And too many people covering their backs on top of each other. And then you get to this situation. Well, we've been asking people, Emma, is this enough at this point, the compensation to have your name cleared? Do you think it's like finally for them it's justice?
How do you get back those years if your marriage fell apart, if you sold your dream home, if you cashed in your pension? So, yeah, I mean, some of the figures seem very high. Some of them seem, you know, £500,000, 75,000 if you only paid out 3,000. But you can't get those years back. You can't get
I'm really
what you went through.
people will say, oh, well, you haven't been in there. I don't think it's about the money right now.
No.
We've had this huge debate yesterday, James, on exoneration. And, of course, you know what I'm like. Yes, everybody should be exonerated straight away. We find out overnight that, of course, some of them want... Because I don't think you want to be dragged through the Court of Appeal after years and years of trauma, but actually we're being told that some do want their day in court. They don't want this sort of general sweeping thing. And then, of course, as Rosie said earlier, there might well be within the 700 one or two who are guilty. And, of course, then the difference between a democratically elected government and a legal system, it's a big, big problem.
Yeah, it is. I think it's about, you know, what kind of personality type you are in some ways. Some people do want their day in court. Other people have locked themselves away because they felt publicly shamed by what happened and they just want to be exonerated so they can go out and hold their head high again. But I think, yeah, no amount of money can bring back bring some of these people, give them their lives back because they will be exonerated, but they've lost years of their lives feeling publicly shamed because they've had this sense of guilt attached to them for something they didn't do.
Yeah, and being publicly shamed, shunned by their communities. Billy, good morning, because we've been asking, you know, do you think this is too little too late? Well, using that terminology, Billy says Sunak's announcement to overturn convictions in the post office scandal is too late for the ones who are dead and too little for the ones who are alive.
Joanna, I'm not sure what justice looks like for those exonerated after decades. It shouldn't have taken so long. What shocks me is that it took a television show to expose and investigate the failure of this huge conglomerate called the British Post Office.
Sometimes people talk about the drama, but it's really powerful storytelling. That's what helps, and that's what they didn't have up until this point, to say, right, we're going to get some of the best creative teams to just make people think about what's happened. Saying morning, he says no amount of money can ever compensate for the criminal injustice carried upon innocent postmasters. Everyone, including our MPs, post office bosses and Fujitsu, should be put behind bars.
Listen, it's going to go on and on. Talk today at talk.tv. Text to 87222. Start your message with the word talk. The new law, the post office law. Too little, too late. We want to hear from you. Let's crack on with the papers. James, front page of the Times, the other big news story overnight. Britain and America are on the brink of launching military strikes against the Houthis in Yemen after repelling the largest attack yet by the Iranian-backed rebels in the Red Sea.
Yeah, so the Houthi rebels in the Red Sea, backed by Iran, they've been attacking cargo vessels, basically in response to Israel's bombardment of Gaza, ostensibly in response to that. And Britain and America have been, for the past few months, they've been saying that, you know, if the Houthis don't stop this, there'll be airstrikes on Houthi positions. And the Houthis haven't stopped doing this, and it's carried on. So apparently Grant Shapps is saying we're on the verge now of striking the Houthi positions. On the one hand, this is because, you know, you've got a terrorist group basically holding the world to ransom because so much global cargo travels through the Red Sea, and if it's not able to do that, then it adds a lot of money to prices for goods all around the world. And it will actually also, there are predictions that the British economy itself could shrink by at least 0.3% if this issue isn't dealt with. So it's an economic problem here, it's a global issue, and it's also the principle of, you know, the Iranian regime shouldn't be allowed to hold the world to ransom by using their proxies to kind of shut down the Red Sea shipping lanes.
We were talking, Emma, to Chris Parry earlier, who says Grant Shapps has routinely said, you know, like, keep acting like this and we'll act. What do you think the Defence Secretary is actually trying to message there? Because is it kind of an empty threat?
It does. Well, I was just thinking that as James was talking there. a few weeks, Grant Shapps has been saying this. So does he mean it, or is this an empty threat? It's clear that this region is on the verge, and it's a tinderbox and very, very alarming. We should all be concerned, and it should be more on the front pages. But one wonders how serious Grant Shapps is about this. I haven't heard a lot from Sunak about this either, and I just... You know, it's obviously a really, really crucial time.
He also jumped up yesterday and was talking about the Marines and asking them to justify yourself. And, of course, although James Bloodworth and I don't always agree, I'm beginning to understand his cynicism. It's election year, isn't it? You know? But Chris Parry is quite vehement in what he says, which is that the world is at a point where, you know, totalitarianism against... And, you know, people will say, oh, you're warmongering. No, have a look in Ukraine, have a look in the Middle East, have a look at what's happening in the Red Sea. We're at a seminal moment, I think.
Yeah, and you can't let the shipping lanes just be cut off like that. I mean, the Americans will probably go, and I think Grant Shapps, it's kind of out of his hands because it will be a case of will Britain stand with the Americans when they go and do this?
Moving on, Emma the Eye. This is interesting. You'll love this, Rosie, won't you?
Yeah, the headline is Starmer plans to adopt a nanny state approach to protect child's health. What is this nanny state approach?
Right, so he's got a child health action plan, and you'll be delighted to know, Jeremy, Keir Starmer is on a worldwide UK UK tour. He's on a year-long UK tour.
Where can I see him? Where can I go?
Exactly.
Milton Keynes or somewhere exciting.
And look, ideologically, I thought, oh, God, stay away from me with your nanny state and stay away from me, Keir Starmer. But actually, when you look into the detail, he's talking about, well, firstly, banning e-cigarettes and vapes, or banning the branding, the colourful, fun, child-friendly. Yeah, the packaging, which very much, even though it's illegal to sell them to under 16s, it's very much appealing towards children rather than your average 35-year-old man. So he's talking about that, but he's also talking about things like toothbrushing being mandatory in schools. He's talking about breakfast clubs for children. He says British kids are fatter than the French, less happy than the Turkish, and wait for it, shorter than the Haitians. Haitians?
Shorter?
Well, it's not really their fault that they're shorter than Haitians. Haiti.
Sorry, joke. Yeah.
But this is about malnutrition. So he's taking on this thing where children are. I mean, the biggest cause of admission to hospital for children is tooth decay.
That's ridiculous.
It is. And actually, things like making them brush their teeth at breakfast club, why not? I mean, I'm so sorry.
I don't understand, and I know I'm old-fashioned.
No,
right?
I know, I agree. Parents should be doing this.
You brush your kids' teeth,
of course
don't
I do,
you?
and it's a nightmare and you have to do it. But I get it. But when parents are not doing it, what happens? The children suffer.
The argument, of course, is, which people will have, is nanny state. You know, there's too much being told what we should do. What's your view on this, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, my view on the nanny state stuff is mixed. I think if you're an adult, I think it can be annoying to have the state hectoring you. You shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. But I think with children, I do think you're susceptible as a child to certain types of advertising. So Keir Starmer says in this speech, you know, bubblegum-flavoured vapes, they're not marketed to 30-year-old men. That's specifically directed at children. And I think there is a case for protecting children from certain types of advertising. There is also a case for saying that, you know, if children aren't being looked after properly by their parents, the state, on occasion, should step in, because I don't think it's fair for a child to suffer, for a child to have these trips to the dentist, just because their parents aren't teaching them how to clean their teeth.
And to hospitals. And, you know, the thing is, some children get critically ill from these vapes and things. And Keir Starmer takes it on. He says, I know, you know, you're going down the road of the nanny state. He says, yes, but we want to have that fight.
Also,
and for once, I respect him.
Nanny state, it's about looking after children.
It's about looking after children.
He'll say they're not being looked after at home. Therefore, we take the responsibility to do it.
Who suffers if children go into school and they haven't had a proper breakfast and they haven't brushed their teeth and all of that? The children suffer.
Said it
and then they end up in hospital.
Said it yesterday and got slaughtered. You have to pass a test to drive a car. You don't have to pass a test to have a kid.
As you have proven.
All right, you're 2 weeks on Friday. Number 6
on Friday,
incoming.
But
yes, fantastic.
Outcoming.
Should we move to the Telegraph, James? A new nuclear station.
Should we move to the Telegraph?
To power 6 million homes. What is the plan?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a plan for a new nuclear power station. They haven't set exactly where it's going to be yet. There are a few possible locations. This story's being very hyped, but when you actually look into the detail, it's slightly disappointing. So Britain's planning to build, you know, several nuclear reactors before 2050. Whereas when you look around the world, like the UAE has just built 4 reactors in 10 years, and we're planning to build 2 or 3 by 2050. It's not very ambitious. It feels like the last kind of 10 years, 13 years have been wasted on nuclear power. There was a big blueprint for 10 new nuclear power stations in 2009. Nick Clegg famously said in 2010, he said, "Oh, there's no point building new nuclear power stations because they won't be online until 2022." Which, you know, now we'd have some of
guess
these
what?
online.
It's 2024,
Yeah,
mate.
David Cameron was also against them because the Fukushima incident around that time, the mood kind of turned. Boris, during his time, was actually very good on this issue. He was saying, you know, going to have a new generation of nuclear power stations. But, you know, this is the first thing that's really been said since Boris was deposed. It's being really played up as, you know, new generation of nuclear power, but it'll only really power about 25% of Britain's energy needs by 2050, which isn't really enough if we want to do the whole green energy thing.
And just a few weeks ago, Boris Johnson said to Sunak, just get on with it. And this is the response. And look, it's clear that we face major energy challenges and major energy insecurity. We've got to do something.
I'd love to do the next story, but apparently, are we out of time, John? Can I not do the next one? Honest to God, he's nagging me in my ear.
Well,
more
okay,
in the next hour.
Emma and James will be back, so thank you both very much.